Hello, everyone, and welcome to this next session of Library 20.013. We just want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors for the conference for us. And so what I'm going to do real quick here to get us started is go ahead, if you could select the star icon on your Blackboard Collaborate functionality there and just kind of place yourself on the map. Let me know where you're coming in from. Be greatly appreciated. And looks like we got some, oh, not Europe. Europe? Yeah, there we go. All right. Yep, just pull on that and click there, and we get a rough idea of who I'm talking to. Hungary. All right, thank you and welcome, and thanks everybody for logging in for this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn that back off. And let's go ahead and jump right in. So I'm here to talk about technology and libraries. What's next? Now, the way I like to do this presentation is I start out with some things that for some of you might be already considered common, but I don't know who's doing what in my audience. So I like to start out with some technologies that have been around a little bit, then kind of work out from there, and then by the end of this session, generally we're talking about stuff that has happened in the last couple of weeks or even a couple of months and you may not have heard of, and who knows what we might do with them in the future. I do want to start real quick with a quote from Douglas Adams. He created what was known as the 3 rules of technology, and so I'm just going to quote him here to make sure I get this absolutely right. He said, "I've come up with a set of rules that describe our reactions to technology. 1, anything that was in the world when you were born is normal and how the world works. 2, anything that's invented between when you were 15 and 35 is new and exciting and revolutionary, and you can probably get a career in it. And 3, anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things." So as you can see, various of us can relate to those in different ways, but I think it's a great way to kind of look at technology, a little bit of humor in there. And also, like I said, I'm going to kind of build this presentation in 3 sections, kind of the stuff that's been here for quite a while but you may not be using yet, the stuff that's really kind of new and exciting, and then the stuff that's really out there and some of you may think are actually against the natural order of things. I also want to share, before we dive in, this cartoon from a 1906 issue of Punch magazine, and talking about the development of wireless telegraphy, and this scene in Hyde Park where these 2 youngsters, if you notice the antennas sticking out of their heads there, are sitting there reading sports scores and getting messages from their friends, but they're not actually talking to each other. So this whole idea of how young people are using technology and our technology's impact on our society, everything old is new again. It's probably, as much as we might complain about some of the new technologies, people have been complaining about new technologies all along. So to get started here, I want to talk kind of in this first part about some technologies that are new-ish to libraries. They may not be new to you, but they are definitely, with some libraries that I deal with, say here in Nebraska, small and rural libraries, are new, and I just kind of want to use these to get people up to speed. I'm going to start with content management systems. I don't know how many of you are still coding your websites by hand, but this is something that you definitely, I would say, want to maybe get over. I've written 2 books on HTML and CSS. I hand-coded all of my websites starting back in 1994 when I discovered what the web was. But nowadays, I think I've totally kind of gotten over it. Whether you use something like WordPress or Drupal or Joomla, content management systems, especially for your library's website, if not for your own personal website, are definitely the way you want to go. So content management systems, not exactly new technologies, but there's still a lot of libraries out there not using them, so I wanted to kind of start with those. Another technology that you may not be using in the library but has been around for a while are audio-video digital converters. I'm working on a project right now at the Library Commission where we've got old VHS tapes back to the 1970s of presentations and sessions, and it's all content we own, but we even had to recently buy a VHS player because we didn't even have one in our collection. But what I'm able to do with this box for about $50 is connect the VHS player into one end, USB cable into the other end directly into a computer, and I can convert that analog content to digital content and kind of preserve that content and move it forward with the formats that are going on. I know of some libraries that have actually made these available to patrons and have hooked up a special workstation where people can bring in their VHS tapes, stick them in, hit play, get the content back digitally. Angie's asking a question, what is the quality like? It's basically going to be about your 480 lines standard digital analog to digital quality. So it's not, unless you've got specialized software, it's not going to clean it up. It's not going to make it any better than the original. So if you've got a really old tape, the quality isn't going to necessarily be any better. But for $50, it will at least preserve that content and move it on to the next format. Tablets, many of us are using tablets individually. I have a Nook Color that I run as an Android tablet, iPads, that sort of thing. These are all available. Well, what a lot of libraries are doing is actually starting to use them as ways to do reference work with the patrons. I remember probably about 10 or 15 years ago hearing that the Denver Public Library was doing this spectacular thing with technology at the reference desk. They had cordless phones and headsets. And what they would do is they would actually get a phone call and stay on the phone with a patron and walk into the stacks and help them with their research without having to put them on hold, go get something and bring it back to the desk and then take them back off of hold. And I thought that was spectacular. But, 10 or 15 years ago, that was. These days, now we've got people coming in digitally, whether it be through chat or email or whatever, or being able to help people out that are physically in the library. Something like a tablet and a good wireless connection could allow you to easily kind of get out from behind that reference desk and still have all of those resources available to you, and to allow you to take those databases with you and help people. And, maybe not even in the library. How about, taking a tablet or a laptop to the local Starbucks and doing some reference work there? I know of some libraries that have been doing that too. Our next tech is mobile payments. Square is the one in particular that I want to mention. I just last night was at an event at the Omaha Public Library and purchased an art print. It was a reception for the Omaha Lit Fest. And I was able to just hand over my credit card to the guy behind the table selling the prints, and he swiped my card through this little device plugged into his cell phone, his smartphone, and signed right on the screen, and it automatically emailed me my receipt. This has some possibilities for uses in libraries. Think of, paying fines, things like that. Maybe you don't need a full-blown cash register. Maybe you just need a smartphone or an iPad or something like that and start doing mobile payments. I mean, think about the idea of, if you're doing reference in the Starbucks and somebody's like, well, I've got some fines. You could say, hey, how about you want to pay your fines right now? We can do that right here on the iPad or my phone. So something you might consider. I don't know of any libraries actually doing this at the moment, but it definitely has some possibilities and something you might want to look into. Okay, so next one, smartwatches, and actually this one sitting here on the screen is a Pebble. I actually wear a Pebble myself. I'm going to kind of hold it up to the screen here, see if you can read that. It's got some information about the weather, the time, the date, the battery level of my cell phone. Smartwatches are kind of the next thing that are coming. I don't know if they're going to really catch on. The Galaxy Gear just came out. Like I said, the Pebble here was kind of the first of this new generation. It's an e-paper watch, so similar to e-ink devices, e-readers that you might be familiar with. And it syncs to my smartphone so that if I get a text message, the text message shows up on my watch. If I get various alerts, I've been one of the things I found useful for recently is I've been doing a lot of two-factor authentication for logging into certain websites. So I will type in my password and then it will text me a code. Well, instead of pulling out my phone, I get the code right on my wrist. And Natalie, you're asking, do I use my Pebble every day? Yes, I do actually wear it pretty much every day. It's the first watch I've worn in about 20 years. And I'm still getting the feel for how it works and what I can get out of it, but yeah, I find it quite handy. This is also a neat little thing about the Pebble. It was a Kickstarter project, and I'll come back to Kickstarter in a few minutes, where they asked for $10,000 or $20,000, something like. They ended up getting well over $1 million. So this is a category that I think is coming and will actually happen. How you can use it in the library, I'm going to kind of leave you to figure that one out. More of a concept than anything else is this concept of personal data collection, and my next couple of slides kind of fall into that category. And this first one here is a Fitbit, which I have on my other wrist, as you'll see here. This particular one I have is shown here. It's the Fitbit Flex. This is basically just a pedometer. Newer versions will also do things like elevation, so step climbing, things like that. It gives me, I've set it up so that it gives me a percentage of my 10,000 a day step goal that I've set up, and it kind of vibrates when I reach my goal for the day. I can put it in a sleep mode and wear it when I'm in bed and sleeping or trying to sleep, and it will track how efficiently I'm sleeping, how often I'm restless in the night, how long it took me to get to sleep. And then as you'll see over on the right here, all of this data gets automatically synced through my computer to a website, and I can track my steps, and then I can also add other information such as my weight. It'll give me sleep patterns, things like that. And then there's also a bit of a gamification to this where I can have friends and follow other people. We can compete, and I can earn badges. So this one day when I walk 20,000 steps, I earn a badge for that. If I make 30,000 one day, I would earn a different badge, things like that. So I'm collecting this data about myself. Now, to be honest, why I started doing this is our health insurance at the state of Nebraska has a wellness plan, and by counting my steps, I get a discount on my health insurance. But I've been able to pull some interesting data out of this. Also, under the concept of personal data collection, this is a Miyamoto. This runs, I think, about $150. It is a camera that you clip to your shirt, your belt, something like that. Probably the shirt is the better idea. And every 30 seconds, 24/7, it takes a picture and then uploads those pictures to your account. So it's almost like personal life journaling through photography. I do not own one of these. I haven't been able to kind of justify it to myself to spend that much money on this sort of project, but I think if somebody gave me one for Christmas, I would wear it, and it would get a little interesting. But so you could track your steps and then track actually what you were looking at all day long. A little outside of purely personal data collection, but still data collection about your life, is this concept of the Nest thermostat. This is a newer thermostat that you can program remotely and access through your smartphone, so that you can, turn on the heat if you're going to come home early, things like that. But one of the coolest things about how the Nest thermostat works is it actually learns when you're home, when you're not home, what temperature you like, things like that. So over time, you can see how, or you can see that the Nest will adjust and automatically, and the idea is instead of having to program it to a particular thing, and then saying, oh, it's winter now, we need to adjust, it will figure out, hey, it's getting colder out, I need to adjust the heat based on what you've done in the past. And Megan, I see you left a comment about the Miyamoto there, how it could work for UX trials. Yeah, actually, that I think would be a really great way to possibly look at it. So another area of personal data collection, and one more with personal data collection, is Waze. Waze is really interesting. I don't know if anybody in the audience has used it. If you have, just kind of say yes in the chat. If you've used Google Maps, you can get directions through Google Maps, and it will tell you where to go and where to turn, and probably won't send you into a lake or something like that. What Waze does is it takes it kind of one step further and makes it social. So all people who are using Waze are sending all of their data back to the central Waze server, and as you can see in the screen, kind of in the center of your slide there, all of those different balloons are either other Waze users or events that Waze users have notified the system of, such as there's a car off on the side of the road, or there's a cop up ahead. It will know how fast you're going, and it will highlight your route based on the speed. So If it notices that other Waze users 5 miles down the road are suddenly going a lot slower than they should be going on that road, it might automatically reroute you. And I recently used this. Back in August, I took a 4,000-mile road trip from Nebraska down to Florida and back, and we used Waze, and a couple of times it really did let us know that there was a hazard up ahead or some construction, and rerouted us and allowed us to get around some problems. I think it was really, really handy, and it kind of takes that idea of just directional and adds more data to it and makes it a little more social and allows you to track where you're going. Now, to tell that this is really kind of the future, several months ago, Google actually bought Waze, the company. And I don't know if you know how much, but they bought it for $1 billion. So I'm pretty much expecting that probably within about the next 6 months to a year, you'll see these features of Waze show up in Google Maps. And it won't be two separate products. It will actually be Google Maps with these Waze social features in it. So I've talked about ways you can collect data about you personally, your home, your travels. All of this kind of collects into this concept of big data. Okay? And that screenshot, if any of you watch the show Person of Interest, that's almost kind of the science fiction-y concept of big data. If you've been reading anything about what the NSA is doing and the collection of data that they're doing, that is a big data story. Big data is a little hard to define, but it's just more data, more information, because these days storage is no longer an issue. And so the more data you can collect, the more potential you have to learn something from that data. Now, I'm not saying big data is perfect, because as some people say, like with the NSA, they want to find more information, so in order to find more information in this haystack, they just collect a bigger haystack. Well, it's not always simple having more data, but the one thing I can say when it comes to big data is if you don't have the data, you can't figure out anything from it. Okay? So that's what a lot of people are doing, is just collecting more and more and more, and then maybe worrying or later figuring out exactly what they're going to do with it. But to tie it back to libraries, the one thing I would say is the potential here is that libraries can be a tool and a resource for helping people deal with big data and these concepts. Okay. All right, the next one is crowdfunding. I already mentioned a little earlier with the Pebble Watch that it was a Kickstarter project. There are others out there. Indiegogo is another one. And basically what this is you have an idea. Now, the idea could be creating a product. The idea could be publishing a book. The idea could be making a film. And you don't have the money, or you can't necessarily convince somebody to give you all the money that you need. What you do is you put the project up on one of these websites and you say, hey, I need $30,000 to pull off making my movie. Please contribute. And if you contribute $5, you get my thanks. If you contribute $15, you get your name in the credits. If you contribute $30, you get a copy of the DVD when it comes out, things like that. And so people then contribute the money. If they make their funding goal, then they get the money. If they don't, then they don't get their money. And if you are a contributor, you keep your money. There's technically no official guarantee that you will ever get a product out of it, but so far everything I have funded and has gotten its money, I have gotten what I was promised out of it. And there have been several projects that libraries have used on either Kickstarter or Indiegogo. The two I can think of off the top of my head, one is the Library Box 2.0 project, which is something I'm going to talk about in just a moment. And the other one was a public library that wanted to market their graphic novel collection. I guess it was pretty significantly sized, so they raised the money through Kickstarter to put up a statue of the Hulk inside the library. So I thought that was a great way to advertise their graphic novel collection. So speaking of that particular project, Library Box, this was a project, hardware project, created by Jason Griffey out of the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. What this is the little white box you see there is just a small Wi-Fi router. some cabling, USB flash drive sticking out of the side, and the bigger thing, kind of the gray thing underneath it towards the bottom there, is just a battery pack. And what the library box is a portable Wi-Fi hotspot that people can connect to on a device that supports Wi-Fi, cell phone, tablet, laptop, computer. And then what is on that USB flash drive that's connected to it is content, in this case, ebooks. So it's kind of a little mini portable ebook server. He has instructions for how to build one and buy the parts yourself. I will admit I tried to do that and I ended up bricking mine, so I obviously skipped a step in his instructions. But with what he did was he created kind of a second generation, completely put together, and I contributed, I think it was something like $80 on Kickstarter. He funded his project. I think he wanted $10,000. He got somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000 or $70,000, and he is currently building these and shipping them out to people starting here very shortly. So this is not only a librarian using crowdfunding to fund a project, but also a project that you could specifically use in the library. Now, my next tech is 3D printers. And 3D printers have been getting a lot of press lately. I'm going to guess that everybody who is listening to me right now or watching this recording has probably heard of 3D printers. The one here on the left of the slide is the MakerBot Replicator 2.0. The one over on the right, the little smaller one there, is called the Cube. The MakerBot's open source. The Cube is a proprietary model, but there's a price difference. I think the MakerBot runs about $1,500 and the Cube runs about $300 or $400. But the idea here is that you can print three-dimensional objects. Now, 3D printing has been around for years and years in various forms. I don't want to get into all the super technical details of it here, but these devices are getting down to the sub-$500 range and are practically ready for home use. People are buying them and putting them in their homes. I ordered one off of Kickstarter, and I will hopefully be getting mine in February, and that one cost me about $400. What can you do with a 3D printer? Well, I've got one little story here I want to share briefly with you about ideas for 3D printers. Basically, it's down to the imagination. The first issue is that I went to a meeting at the University of Nebraska Lincoln campus here about 3D printing on the UNL campus. And they had about 40 or 50 people show up to this meeting, and they went around the room and asked everybody, are you 3D printing already? If so, what are you doing? And if not, what would you be interested in doing? And there was the architectural department and the engineering department kind of printing out models and printing out parts. But then they got to somebody from the fashion department, and the fashion department said they were really interested in printing buttons for clothes. Then there was somebody from the music department who was there and saying, we've got a bunch of these 1970s era harpsichords that have these little tiny pieces in them that are cheap plastic that keep breaking. We'd like to be able to print our own parts. And I just sat there and I had thought about 3D printing and I had presented on 3D printing, and the idea of buttons and parts for harpsichords just hadn't even dawned on me. I thought that it was so wonderful. So there are libraries out there that have these, that are offering them to the public to allow people to bring in designs and print things. It's definitely, I think, it's coming. It's part of the whole maker movement. It is something you definitely want to think about for your library if you can find the funds. The one other story I will share here real briefly about 3D printing is this is actually a model of a trachea for a 3-year-old boy. And there's this part right here kind of on the left. And basically it's a stint. They 3D modeled and 3D printed a stint for a child's trachea to actually allow him to be able to breathe properly. So, if you're looking for why somebody would want to 3D print something, here is kind of maybe the ultimate reason, I would say. Along with 3D printers are 3D scanners. And so there are a couple of different models floating around out there. 3D scanners, if you've ever watched a movie that has special effects in it in probably the last 15 years, there have been kind of full-size 3D scanners that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they put little ping-pong balls on people so they can scan their heads and scan their bodies. This one here, this is called the MakerBot Digitizer. This one runs, I think, about $900, if I'm correct. And you set your object on the little turntable, and it kind of spins around, and there are a couple of cameras built in there. And so you can now scan a three-dimensional object, take that scan, and then put that model into your 3D printer and duplicate that object. So there's kind of this one. Another one, which, by the way, is a Kickstarter project right now, is a 3D scanner that you hook up to your iPad. So you connect this to your iPad, and then you kind of take pictures as you walk around the item and above the item and below the item. And so the idea is, since you're not set on a particular stand, you're not necessarily limited to the size of the object. Now, I'm sure you're not going to 3D model a full-size car with this thing, but you could probably 3D model somebody's head without too much trouble. Whereas trying to set somebody's head on that previously shown 3D scanner might be a little bit of a problem, because you'd have to, detach their head from their body. So probably not a good idea. This is probably a slightly better option there. So, okay, you've got 3D printing, you've got 3D scanning. Let's talk about now a few wireless technologies you may or may not be familiar with. The first is just wireless charging, known as inductive charging. Newer smartphones are coming out with this. Most of us are used to the fact that we have to plug in our devices and then plug that into a wall wart, into the wall, or into a computer to charge it. In this case, with this phone here, it's the inductive charging is built in. You just set it on the pad, you set it on the stand, and it charges basically through touch instead of through a wire. And more devices are going to come with this. Now, that doesn't mean you can start reducing the number of power outlets in your library. Sorry, not going to happen. But as this technology becomes more common and more standardized, you might be able to buy pads that you stick on each of your public tables in your library, and you just say, hey, if you've got an inductive charging device, just set it here. You don't have to plug it into the wall, and it will charge. Now, there still has to be a power source. You're going to have to plug that pad into something, but you don't have to necessarily plug in all of the individual devices into the wall. Another wireless technology is called NFC, or Near Field Communications. This is a wireless communication feature that is basically works just to a few centimeters. It's right now mostly used for payment sort of systems. If any of you have seen Google Wallet, for example, on newer Google phones, where you can just kind of wave the phone against a little pad, such as the sample here, and then it transfers data that way. I've heard of NFC door locks, for example. So you just kind of wave your phone across a little pad next to the door, and it says, "Oh, you're you. I will unlock the door for you." The possibilities are kind of interesting here. Kind of minimal use at this point. We're starting to get kind of into these more and more not sure what to do with them yet sort of technologies, but it's got some interesting possibilities. Now, let's talk hardware for a little bit. HDMI Android sticks. These are really interesting, and probably a newer version of this is kind of like the Chromecast, but not quite. Chromecast is a little different. But for example, this one here, this costs about $50. You plug it into a HDMI port of your television, and it turns your television basically into a giant Android tablet. Okay. It's not suddenly touchscreen, but you can install apps on it, you can stream your Netflix on it, you can install any other items you want. It's got the antenna there for wireless transmission of data across your network. Just something that if you've got kind of a HD TV, but not one of these smart TVs yet, it's something that you can easily plug into your TV and turn it into a smart TV. The next one, and I'm going to kind of do these a little out of order here because I think they're better explained this way. The first one is the Raspberry Pi. I have one of these. In fact, I unfortunately don't have it within reach, or I would hold it up. But it's really not much bigger than you see there. You see an SD card with it that kind of gives you an idea of its size. This is a full-blown, although not high-powered, computer on a board that costs $35. Okay? That's it. $35, you get this board. Now, you're probably going to have to buy some other pieces, but the board itself is $35. It has 2 USB ports, an HDMI video out, an Ethernet connector, a standard RCA video out, and a standard mini audio out also. What you do is you install a Linux-based operating system on an SD card, and there's a slot for that kind of slides along the underside of the Raspberry Pi. You plug it into the wall via a micro USB cable, so probably the same cable that you use to charge your cell phone. And you take those USB ports and you plug in, say, a mouse or a keyboard or a hub, connect it to the network, and you have a fully functional $35 Linux computer. Like I said, not super high powered, but it can do several really great things. It could easily run a slideshow displayed on a monitor behind your circulation desk. It could be used as an ebook server or a video server. Just through that USB connection, plug in a large hard drive and add a whole bunch of storage that way. I know of at least one library here in Nebraska that is using one of these to run an OPAC only workstation. So instead of getting an old giant box of a low-powered old computer, just spend $35 and a couple of cables, install an OS, and you can easily run this as an OPAC workstation, because as long as it's connected to the network, fully functional browser, just off you go and let them use that. Related to that is the Arduino. Now, I have not actually played with an Arduino yet. At the moment, I think it's kind of outside my skill set, but I'd happily take one if somebody wants to give me one. These run about $50, and these are actually microcontrollers. So where the Raspberry Pi is a computer, the Arduino is a microcontroller which is only does one thing. You have to program it to do something, and usually that something involves connecting it to sensors. So I'm going to give you one kind of silly example, but it kind of gives an idea of what it can do. Is the project I heard that I was really interested in was an Arduino that was connected to a moisture sensor which was stuck into a potted plant, and when the dirt got too dry, it sent a text message to your cell phone saying, "Hey, I'm too dry, please water me." I'll admit, it seems a little silly, but it kind of gives you an idea of what you can do with an Arduino. Okay, a few other ideas with the Raspberry Pi here. This is just one quick suggestion. Somebody built a Raspberry Pi which they turned into a Wi-Fi access point with ad blocking software built in. So, you know, kind of the possibilities are endless. Next piece of hardware, the Senso Drone. This is pretty new. These only came out about a month or two ago. And it's this small device you can put on a keychain and connect to your smartphone, and it's got a carbon monoxide detector, a thermometer, a gas leak detector, a light meter, a weather station, a diagnostic tool, a breath analyzer, and more. It's got something like 15 or 20 different sensors into it. And again, kind of back to that, pulling together that data. This is now just a little device that can sense your environment and then hook that through to your smartphone and an app, maybe off to the Arduino, and see what you can do with it. Okay, so now we kind of get into the stuff that's on the horizon, is kind of out there just a little bit, and then we'll get to these super crazy stuff. Wi-Fi is getting faster. Many of us are right now mostly using what's known as 802.11g, which is going to run at about 54 megabits a second over about a distance of 820 feet. That's pretty handy. Or excuse me, 460 feet. Wireless N has been around for a year or two, although there's not been a lot of adoption. I'm running it in my house, but we're not running it at work. This was Wi-Fi that will work up to 150 megabits a second to 820 feet. But kind of starting to be released right about now is some newer hardware that runs what's called AC, and that is 1 gigabit per second Wi-Fi. Okay? That's insanely fast. But beyond that, there's even a specification now for what's called AD Wi-Fi, which is 7 gigabits per second. Okay? And if you think this stuff is fast, just give me a few more minutes. We're going to get even crazier. But that's just kind of your standard Wi-Fi that we're used to these days. There's something called Super Wi-Fi, which I just learned about a couple of weeks ago through what's known as the Gigabit Libraries Network. And what this group of libraries is trying to do is to create a Wi-Fi that will run at multi-gigabits per second using the space left over from our move from analog to digital television. So it's called Super Wi-Fi, but it's using a different part of the electronic spectrum than the Wi-Fi we're used to uses over what's known as that TV white space. Okay? So, you know, multi-gigabit Wi-Fi through a completely different set of technologies, and there are libraries involved with this one. And if you just Google Gigabit Library Networks, you'll be able to find it. I'll also provide on the last slide a URL that has links to all of this stuff. Okay, next technology, the Energini ePP2 e-paper printer. I'm a lot into e-books, less personally, more professionally. I do e-reader workshops, overdrive workshops, things like that. And this is a new device that, think of printing the PDF. Okay, so you take a document and you print it to a PDF file. Well, this device basically installs a printer driver that allows you to print to the device as an EPUB file. I'm still not sure exactly whether or not I'm excited about this technology, but it's kind of sitting there. It may not catch on. It's got some possibilities, but like I said, we're kind of getting into the newer, kind of freakier stuff as we go on here. Leap Motion. This is cool. I've actually met one person who had this. They had attached it to their Mac, and kind of the day before I gave this presentation, so they were still working on it, so they had no report for me. But if you've ever seen that, you know, what they call Minority Report interface, where you kind of wave your hands in front of your computer and things happen on the screen based on where your hands are. Well, this is that. It's a little $80 device. You set in front of your monitor, you then wave your hands around, and it knows where your hands are, and it does things on the screen in relationship to that. Some Asus laptops are actually starting to build this into the laptop itself. So instead of reaching for a mouse, you would just lift your hand up and wave in front of it, or above it, and you move around on the screen. So, you know, kind of new interface, new possibilities there. Google Glass. You know, okay, $1,500, developer only. There was already reports recently that I saw that when it finally does come out for the regular user, it's not going to look like this at all. But I think the possibilities of this kind of heads-up display might make you look like a dork, but is just cool. And I can just start imagining. I was talking about doing reference on, you know, portable phones and then on tablets. Imagine doing reference with Google Glass. I think that's definitely got some possibilities there. And then 4K television. Okay, now just in case you didn't think your television was high definition enough, you've got standard definition, which was 480 lines. You've got what's known as full high definition right now, which is 1,080 lines of detail. 4K televisions are actually out. Now, nobody's broadcasting 4K, but 4,000 lines of resolution. Okay? That's super detailed. It's practically a window at this point on the world instead of a monitor that you're looking at. And as far as I know, there's one piece of content you can purchase right now in 4K resolution. You can get Ghostbusters in 4K. Okay? Why Ghostbusters? I have no idea. 4K televisions right now, $1,500? I mean, there's a couple out there that are, you know, would seem expensive for a television, but HD televisions were $1,500, $3,000 just 5 years ago, so this is coming. Okay, so last section. This is now the hold on to your socks. This stuff gets really, really freaky. If you, at this point, have been wowed by anything I've shown you, just hold on to your socks. Okay, I just finished talking about 4K televisions and 4K video. Well, guess what? 8K is coming. It actually exists. They're going to double the resolution yet again. At this point, you might as well just, probably your eyes aren't even this good, okay, especially if you're wearing corrective lenses, okay. 8K is coming. It's going to take a little longer, but it is going to be a little crazy. And Megan, yes, 8,000 lines of resolution. At this point, you're going to need a 50 or 60-inch television just to appreciate it to start with. The Internet of Things. This is a concept. Don't want to spend too much time on it. It's kind of like big data, but the idea that every single thing will have an IP address and connected to the Internet. Okay? So whether it be via RFID or QR codes or NFC or Wi-Fi or any of these wireless technologies I talked about or some that I'll get to in a moment, just imagine if every single thing had a connection to the Internet. Now, this is the whole your refrigerator connected to the Internet concept, but it's still coming. We're getting closer, and then things start to get really freaky. All right. Okay, so if you thought Google Glass was cool, okay, how about a contact lens display? Okay. Now, it's really hard to see, but I'm going to use my pointer here and point at that one little dot on this contact lens. Researchers have successfully created a display on a contact lens of exactly 1 pixel. Okay, so this is not exactly useful right now. Basically, the pixel's on or the pixel's off. Okay? But they have successfully created a display on contact lenses. So that whole science fiction of, putting the contact lens in and getting a readout, it's coming. They're actually working on it. Okay? Next one, you are your password. This was demonstrated at an All Things D conference in the last, I think earlier this year. The idea here being that without actually, it's more of a tattoo, but with electronic ink. And so instead of waving your phone at something to say unlock the door, you just wave your wrist at it, and it says, "Oh, you're you." So you don't even, it's not even biometrics. It's not fingerprint. It's something that has been physically attached to you to identify you, and that I would say would easily freak some people out. So we'll just not spend too much time on that one. We see this I find really interesting. The leap motion that I talked about earlier. Natalie, can you rub it off? No, I do believe it's permanent, but yeah, so it takes a certain type of person to want to make that permanent, I would say. The we see. What this researcher had noticed is that, for example, the leap motion where you wave over it, or the Xbox Connect, like if I wave at my camera here, those are all camera-based technologies. Okay, what this researcher figured out is that Wi-Fi is all around us. Wi-Fi is an electronic radio signal. If you move through it, you disrupt it. So what he was able to figure out was to be able to use the Wi-Fi that was already there to track your movements. Okay? So just think about that one. No cameras, just interrupting the Wi-Fi around you, being able to track your movements. Okay? All right. Project Loon. This is Loon is in balloon, by the way, not loony, but it was done in New Zealand, so go figure. This is a Google project to distribute Wi-Fi to remote areas via high altitude weather balloons. Okay, just let that sink in for just a second there. Okay, so high altitude, you're not worrying about planes. You're able to control them a little bit through the high-level currents in the air, but then the idea is that instead of connecting to a satellite for your internet connection, you're connecting to a balloon with an antenna hanging from the bottom of it. There is video of this. They did actually get it work. And somebody in Jamaica, you're in New Zealand, you thought it was weird. I think it's weird, but hey, sometimes you got to try the weird stuff to figure out what works and what doesn't. So there you go. All right, I've got 3 more technologies here. 3 gigabit per second Li-Fi. Okay, this was demonstrated at a TED Talk. This is using LED light bulbs and basically transferring data via the light that is being emitted. So it's not radio signal at this point, it's light signal. So fiber optics are light signal, but they have to be over a glass piece of wire. In this case, you're actually just using light through the air to connect at 3 gigabits per second. Now, this is not going to be over your standard LED light bulb that you buy at a Home Depot, but it's coming. It's interesting. It is definitely something that's out there, taking it one step further. Okay, 2 more. Next one here, going to click the right button. Wireless electricity over a distance. So instead of setting your thing on a pad and inductive charging through that connection, this is actually sending electricity over a distance. We're in Nikola Tesla territory here, but for example, automatic wireless charging of, say, a car battery or for an electric car, so that you pull into the garage, kind of over on the wall is the charging station, but instead of having to physically plug it into the wall, it just says, hey, I'm within a distance, send me my power, and it charges overnight without being connected. This is being worked on and is in development right now. Okay, and then last one, transferring data through your body. We talked about kind of near-field communications and wireless communications and plenty of communications through wires, whether that be Ethernet, things like this. But in this case, Microsoft is playing around with the idea of, say, for example, my smartwatch connects to my phone wirelessly right now, which is fine, okay? But, for example, maybe I want to authenticate that it's me, okay? Or I want to transmit something securely without having to connect a wire. The idea here is that while I'm wearing my watch, I touch my phone, and that data is transferred using me as the conduit instead of a separate wire or over the air where somebody might be able to sniff at it. Okay? So kind of last example there, transferring data through your body. Okay, how freaky is that? So with that, it looks like I have about 2 minutes left of time. There is my contact information. I want to thank everybody for attending. The URL across the bottom, the delicious URL there, if you go to that, there are links to all of the technologies I talked about. So if you're interested in finding out anything more about any of those, that is the URL you would want to go to. This recording will be available. I will be posting my slides on SlideShare. If you're interested in those, you can just find me, search my name or Traveling Librarian on SlideShare. And with that, I am done. Thank you, folks, for the comments. If there's any other questions about any of the tech I've talked about, I'll do my best to answer those for you.
Thank you, Michael. That was an exceptional presentation. If anybody wants to have mic privileges, I can certainly release those to you guys for question taking, or you can use the chat window. Just let us know through the chat if you'd like to speak to the mic. Thank you. One question, Michael, did you have a slide? I'm sorry if I missed it. Did you have a slide that listed the all the URLs of these different products, or that's it there through that you've got posted?
Yeah, through the delicious link on the slide that's up right now we'll provide, you go to that one link, and that'll be a page of all links to all of the stuff that I talked about.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, that was very informative. A lot of great products. You test a lot yourself. That's very interesting.
I play with what I can. Usually comes down to affordability, if nothing else.
Yeah, no doubt. Do you have a particular item at home that you're going to 3D print first off?
You know, I haven't thought about it. In fact, just last week, I got my first ever 3D printed object from somebody else I knew had a 3D printer. It was just a 3D printed logo of the Nebraska Library Association. So I finally own a 3D printed object. What I'll actually print first, no, I haven't thought about it. I think I'm going to need to think about that myself.
See, it would be great if you could get it before Christmas. And you could do all your Christmas presents somehow in that way.
Yeah, that would be great. But I think because of where I contributed, because the one I'm getting was from a Kickstarter project, kind of the first people who contributed get the first ones, and so I'm scheduled for February or March. So maybe Christmas next year.
Okay, I'll just check again with the session participants. Does anyone have any questions for Michael? Just either raise your hand or type them in the chat box.
While we're waiting, I'll just throw in that in an hour, so when this hour is over, then I get an hour break, and I'm doing another presentation at this conference on the past, present, and future of ebooks and e-readers. So if anybody's interested in that, check the schedule. That will be at in 1 hour and 10 minutes from now. So.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. That should be a good one. So. The recording for this presentation, the replay, pardon me, will be up on the main website. It's generally it's very quick actually, but they recommend they're saying it's about 10-15 minutes. I've found it to be faster, and that's listed under recordings from the main website page if anybody wants to access the presentation after. We'll do one last check if anybody has any questions for Michael, and otherwise I guess Michael will conclude your session for this one.
All right. I do see one quick question here from Natalie, if I will be talking about overdrive. Actually, no. I'm really kind of focusing on the development of e-books and e-reader hardware in general. I might mention overdrive, but I definitely will not be focusing on overdrive.
Okay, well, Michael, I'm going to just stop the recording and give folks a chance to exit the room, and I guess we'll go from there. How's that sound with you?
Okay. Yeah, it sounds good. Thanks a lot.